All right. So today now we're going to start talking about job attitudes. All right. But before we can talk about specifically job attitudes, and by the way, the biggest job attitude is job satisfaction. But there's going to be others. There's going to be others: organizational commitment, etc. But first thing we need to do before we can talk about the application of attitudes into an IO forum is to kind of talk about attitudes in general. I mean, what are they? Okay. So attitudes are, well, a predisposition to respond cognitively, emotionally, etc. Well, attitudes have three components. In fact, here's a good diagram to show really what an attitude is. Okay, let's say here is an employee. They have an attitude towards their company. Okay, there's going to be a cognitive component. I am being treated unfairly. Okay, there is an affective, an emotional component. I feel miserable coming to work. Oh, it's a horrible experience. Oh, why made me do it, right? And then the behavioral component, and that is, what are you going to physically do? And so we're going to have a little bit of discussion here. I mean, not like I would in a social psychology class, but in some kind of ways, attitudes predict behaviors, okay? Which is why when we get to job satisfaction as a specific attitude in IO psychology, job satisfaction predicts job performance. Okay, so that's where it's going to move toward. Okay, so where do attitudes come from? I mean, one of the biggest ones is attitudes come from parents. All right, so it's like if you find somebody who's incredibly racist, go talk to their parents, and chances, not always, but chances are their parents are also incredibly racist. It's just probably going to be true. Okay. Attitudes come through classical conditioning. This is how advertisers can convince you to have positive attitudes towards your product. They'll associate this sneaker with this Michael Jordan who makes all of this, and operant conditioning. It can be done on purpose. Parents and teachers can encourage attitudes towards politeness, for example, by rewarding polite behaviors. Often just from experience, one of the biggest findings in psychology is the exposure effect, and it's just like the more you get exposed to something, the more positive your attitude is. Whether we're talking flavor of ice cream, musical song, person, it doesn't matter. Okay, attitudes become more positive with time. So what we find is that I would love to say, attitudes predict behaviors. I mean, that would be wonderful. But of course, there's going to be outside factors. And so you can see in this diagram, your internal attitude plus external influences will lead to behaviors. You may well have an internal attitude, I hate my company. There may be an external influence. My wife says we can't afford the mortgage if I quit my job. And so all of a sudden the internal attitude of I hate my job doesn't predict the behavior, right? It predicts the opposite. So there's a variety of different things that can influence the degree to which an attitude predicts behaviors. Another problem we have, and I mean this is true in many, many, many areas of psychology, is that all we can measure is expressed attitudes. What you physically say out of your mouth. I don't really know what deep down secret things you have. And this is an interesting thing. There was a bit of a controversy that happened in the 2016 presidential election where Donald Trump was polling quite low. I mean, when people were asked, what is your attitude towards Donald Trump? I mean, people were responding quite low, all right? But once they were anonymous, they went to a polling booth and nobody's looking, the behavior was not the same. So it was clearly a case where there was outside influences on people's expressed attitudes, but when allowed to convert their attitudes into behaviors, there it was, okay? So if you measure attitudes in non-reactive ways, maybe you can get it, things such as facial muscle responses, because there's involuntary muscle responses associated with emotions, for example. Okay. And also, when you look at attitudes, they don't necessarily predict behavior on a case-by-case basis, but they will aggregate. That is to say, if somebody has an attitude, I hate my job, that does not allow you to predict anything about what they do on any one given day. But it does allow you to say, across the 1 year span, if somebody's attitude is that they hate their job, then they will tend to be tardy more than somebody that doesn't hate their job. So if you take it across a larger quantity, then all of a sudden, yeah, they are quite predictive, okay? So there's a lot of reasons that that our attitudes can influence our behaviors, but it turns out that our behaviors can also influence our attitudes. And this is one of the most interesting parts of social psychology course, and I'm not teaching a social psych course, but to the degree that the IO field is a application of the principles of social psychology, what can you do, okay? So what happens is that, like in the foot in the door phenomenon, for example, what's going to happen is if you want to get a large favor from somebody, let's say, for example, somebody might have an attitude towards homelessness. Well, I think homelessness is a bad thing. You know, I don't have a strong attitude about it. And so you go to these people and you say, will you volunteer at a homeless shelter? People go, no. Their attitude isn't strong enough for that. But if you instead go through their neighborhood with like a petition, oh, will you sign this petition to increase funding for the homeless shelter? Oh, sure, I'll do that. And the very act of signing that petition has strengthened your attitude towards homelessness, so that now, next week, when somebody comes through and asks if you're volunteer in the homeless shelter, you will more likely to volunteer because your attitude has shifted because you have committed a behavior. Huh? Or how about social roles? Absolutely. Phil Zimbardo's Stanford Prison Experiment was the original that really explored this. The power of the situation. And if you recall very briefly, Phil Zimbardo took a random selection of something like 20 college males and randomly assigned them to be prisoners and guards in a prison scenario. And within like 3 or 4 days, it just devolved so quickly. The attitudes of these participants that were just playing a game, and the attitudes were just so quickly that these guards had this attitude that the prisoners deserved to be punished and deserved to be treated as inhuman. And the prisoners developed much of a helpless attitude that they deserved what they were getting. Okay? So it was amazing how just playing this game, and I can tell you this as attitudes change greatly as your social roles change. Before I was a father, I thought fast cars were cool. As a father, I think fast cars are for idiots. I mean, it's just straightforward. My attitude changed as my social roles changed. So why do behaviors affect attitudes? Now, cognitive dissonance theory is actually a pretty cool study. Originally, Festinger did this research. And his research was kind of boring, but, convince people and pay them and blah, 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 Go check it out. Check the details in your social psych course. But what cognitive dissonance theory basically says is this. Let's say I have an attitude or a belief. I hate my job. I have an action or a behavior. I have this job. Now there's dissonance, okay? And dissonance, kind of going back to the previous module on motivation, it's like it's like hunger. It's cognitive dissonance is like hunger. It's an undesirable internal tension state that you're motivated to remove. Okay, so when you feel this cognitive dissonance, you're motivated to do something to get rid of it. And there's only two things that really but two main things that can be done. Okay. Either you can change your belief, I love my job, or you can change your behavior, I quit. Okay, so these are the two of the two most obvious solutions to this problem. But we're gonna talk a little more about it. But kind of a cool idea here: if you feel this dissonance, you are motivated to remove this dissonance, and you will do so by a variety of things. So here's a kind of a larger, category or different things that you can do. You can change the attitude completely. I love my job. You can, at the furthest end, change your behavior and quit. But there's a variety of different intermediate steps, okay? You can reduce choice, okay? your dissonance can be removed if there are no other jobs. I have to have this job, okay? Or you can talk about, maybe the job isn't terrible. I mean, there are parts that are okay. Or look at this, you can add, okay, so I hate this job, but it gets me a paycheck and I get good insurance from it. So there's a variety of different, from these two far extremes, a variety of different solutions that you can use to reduce that dissonance that you might feel. So why would an IO person study attitudes? And I think I've already said it. To the degree that an attitude can predict behavior, we'll find in the next little video, job satisfaction, generally speaking, predicts job performance. Okay? So that's pretty clear. So it's about the dollars, all right? But some people believe, them wishy-washy humanitarians, right? They believe they should improve work attitudes just to improve the benefit of human beings as a whole. I mean, as psychology majors, generally speaking, we want to help people. That's a general statement for most psych majors. And so to some degree, understanding job attitudes can increase the well-being of workers. Okay? And so my skeptical side says it's all about the dollars here, but all right, I'm going to say we can make the world better too. Okay?